on UVA Legends podcast. I have Lisa Hamilton, my old pal from UVA days. She's the president and CEO of Annie Casey Foundation. She also is just got reappointed as a board member for the Fed, Federal Bank of Richmond, and in particular for her. She had a long career also with UPS as well. Lisa, thanks for doing this. Great to see you.
It's good to see you too, Julian. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, of course. You're a hard person to get. I've been trying for months to get you to sit down for a couple minutes. Well, just to give people the broad sketches of your background. I know you were a couple years at UVA behind me. You were a class of
91.
91. Okay, you're 91.
91.
And you had come from Atlanta. Is that right?
I'm from Atlanta, born and raised in Atlanta. I'm a quintessential Georgia peach.
I know. And then you ended up at Baltimore. And then you ended up at Baltimore. But then you were an associate. You were associate briefly at a firm. You went to University of Michigan Law School.
I did.
Associate attorney at Chamberlain Herdlicka.
Yeah, Herdlicka, hard to pronounce. But yeah, a winding journey. I often tell people when they look at my resume, they have to appreciate I lived it forward. It might look more organized looking backwards, but I lived it forward. But yeah, from Atlanta, and actually got to UVA through the LEAD program. I first went to UVA between my junior and senior year of high school for a program at Darden that was designed to get students of color interested in graduate business school. And I had such a great time at UVA, I decided that was the only place I was going to apply to college. I'm a mom and I can't imagine doing that with my own child, but I told my parents, I'm certain I'll get in. This is where I want to go. And I'm glad that it all worked out. But loved UVA from the time I stepped foot on the campus and was really, really blessed to be able to go there. I loved my experience at UVA.
Well, you're a Georgia peach, but you're not afraid to go somewhere else if business calls. I mean, as I was saying, then you ended up at UPS for many years, and then from UPS you ended up at Annie Casey. And for folks that don't know, James Casey was the founder of UPS.
Right.
He was raised by his mother, and it was very important for him for kids with not as not the strongest background financially as others could have a fair chance and try to improve their opportunities. So anyway, he formed Annie Casey, which is the name of his mother.
Yes.
And so you left UPS and went there around 2011 and have risen to president. And so I guess my first question is, I know a lot about, IBM executives, Xerox executives, but I don't know much about the UPS culture. Now, knowing you, you wouldn't have stayed so long at a UPS, and an UPS kind of, I don't know about affiliated, but at least it's kind of
related.
Yeah, related. You wouldn't have been there so long if the culture wasn't good. So what kind of executive culture does UPS have?
It was a wonderful place to work. As you said, I worked for a number of years at a private law firm and decided I was a corporate lawyer. I was a tax lawyer and decided I wanted to go in-house with a place I could build a longer career and actually get out of being a tax lawyer. It wasn't my life passion. And found this opportunity at UPS, which is headquartered in Atlanta. Many people don't know that, but it has an amazing corporate culture. Jim Casey, the founder, was really an incredible person and really believed in growing talent at the company within. So it's a place that many people spend their entire career. They might start as a package handler in high school, and when they finish college, end up going into management and stay there forever. And one of the reasons you can stay there and do that is because it's such a big company, 400,000 employees, operates in 200 countries. Really, no matter what you're interested in, UPS likely has a job related to that. And so because they believe in promoting from within, you just get lots of opportunities to do lots of different things. It's sort of evidenced by my career there. So here I was, a tax lawyer. I spent 6 years as doing tax for the company. But I found out they had this foundation, and I'd actually been interested in philanthropy when I was in college, but didn't really know how one got into philanthropy. So when I get to UPS and I find out they have this foundation, I build relationships, get to know people, and eventually get the opportunity to go be the program director at the UPS Foundation, which operates as like a department within the company. And then I often say a tax lawyer with a personality is a commodity too precious to leave on the shelf. So they invited me to be a lobbyist in DC. So I moved to DC to be a federal lobbyist and got to know all about the public policy process. Then I came back to run the foundation. And then I got to be the head of public relations for the company. So I was managing investor calls with the CEO, helping to launch new products and services, managing publications like our sustainability report. So it's just an awesome place to work where you got to do lots of different things if you were interested and willing.
Yeah, it is interesting because a lot of times when you look at people's career, you see the vertical moves, but you not only
Mhm.
did you have vertical moves, you had a lot of
I
horizontal
had
moves
many
in both
horizontal
places.
moves. I
You,
did, which was great because
yeah,
you build new skill sets. You know, I got to be a representative. It sort of in retrospective, they are all external facing jobs. I was the face to the IRS. I was a face to the community. I was a face to federal government officials. I was a face to the media. So once you understood the company, what it was about, how it operated, you really did get I got a chance to do all these different jobs, but many of them were horizontal and not vertical. But I'm so grateful for the suite of skills that I gained, being a lobbyist, a public relations professional, all these things I use every day in my work at the foundation.
yeah.
And they were actually the perfect segue to the foundation.
Yeah, well, when I was a young lawyer, there's a woman named Ellen Dyke, and she was married to Jim Dyke, who was the Secretary of Education in Virginia. And I remember as a young lawyer, she pulled me in her office and we're just talking one day. And Ellen was a great lawyer, but she said to me, it's funny, Julian, that women in the law and women in business sometimes, we are just as talented and we can get things done just like men. But sometimes we feel like we have to know everything before we advance. Like a man, whether he knows it or not, will act like it and he'll run with it. Women, we feel like sometimes we have to know everything before we do something. You seem like the kind of person getting involved with the Fed, president of a foundation. You're not afraid to take those chances. If you don't know everything, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn along the way.
You're gonna learn a lot. I mean, I often say I ran public relations for a Fortune 50 company and I'd never written a press release. That's quite a daunting task. But at the end of the day, when you get to a certain level in a company, you learn that it's really about how do you manage people and how well do you know the business strategy. And once you know those things, you can sort of execute in lots of different ways. So by the time I ran public relations, I knew UPS really well. And I was managing a department of about 40 or 50 public relations professionals. My job actually wasn't to directly write the press release every time. I certainly reviewed them and, understood communication strategy, but I knew how to manage people and I understood where the business was trying to go. And with that in mind, you can accomplish a lot. So I don't ever feel like I have to be an expert. And in fact, when I came to Casey, I didn't know anything about child serving systems or human services. And I would sit in meetings and they'd be using terms and language I didn't know. But those skills I'd learned from UPS, I know policy, I know communications, I know what the organization is trying to do. I know how to manage people. It enables you to be effective, even if you don't understand all the specifics all the time.
Yeah. Do people approach you the same way at Annie Casey's that did UPS? Now, I would think when you're UPS, you seem like this huge, 10 million pound gorilla. Where Annie Casey, you're a foundation. You're doing good things. You're nice. Do people approach you the same way, or is it different now?
Well, what's different is that the Annie Casey Foundation is sort of like a 10,000-pound gorilla in philanthropy. We are one of the largest foundations in the country. We have an endowment of about $3.5 billion. So we're one of the 20 or 25th largest foundations in the country. So lots of people who work in this field, who work with kids and families, know the organization. So in that regard, UPS is a household name. Casey is a household name for those in this field. But when you work in philanthropy, you have never been more beautiful. You have never been more funny than you are
That's right.
in philanthropy. I don't think people were as charmed by
Yeah,
me when I worked in corporate America,
yeah.
but they certainly are very attentive at times. In this role, because they obviously are hopeful that they can partner with the foundation in some kind of way. That's not the avenue to do that, but it is amusing at times that people seem to find your jokes a little funnier.
Yeah. Well, how important to your success, or how important is it to you for you to really believe in the mission? Like, for example,
Oh,
we all know how important it is to get our packages there on time. But I think after a while, you're probably more focused on making your division run more efficiently.
mhm,
Making sure we're being as cost effective as possible.
mhm,
Those kind of
mhm.
things. Kind of the huge mission might get lost a little bit. But with any Casey Foundation, you're helping kids get a
Kids,
chance
yeah.
in life. Is the fact that your mission it's easy to get behind? Is it make it easier to go to work and get excited about work?
It is easy and challenging all this in at the same time. In both organizations, they're both about results. And so in that way, I feel like I can be the same person in both environments. UPS was about getting a package delivered. Casey is about getting kids delivered to a positive future. It feels very results oriented. I'm clear on what the goal is in both ways. And I cared about UPS's mission. People need packages to make the
That's
economy
right.
run. That mattered to me.
Yeah.
But this is a heartwarming mission in a lot of ways, and that makes it very easy to want to get up and do the work. But it's more challenging in a lot of ways. We often give lip service and say that we care about kids in this country, but when it comes down to the policies that need to be passed or the opportunities, the doors that need to be open for kids, they don't always happen or open as readily as we would think they could. So it's
Mm.
really hard work in the sense that a lot of kids in this country don't have the opportunities that they need. And so it is easier sometimes to get doors opened when you're a big company, but certainly very important to get doors open when you're working on behalf of kids.
Sure. Yeah. So when you first came over to Annie Casey, did
Mhm.
being a president of the company one day, was that something you had in mind, or were you just trying
It
to
wasn't.
go there and do the best job you possibly could?
I really just came to do the best job I possibly could. It didn't even occur to me that I might be the president of the foundation. I'm only the third president, and my two predecessors were PhDs in social work, and they were very different than I was. They'd had long histories in human services, and so in some ways, in my mind, I thought that was what the prototype would be. Um, I came to do this great job. I came as the vice president of external affairs, which when you reflect back on what I did at UPS, I did grant making, I did policy, and I did communications. That's what I did for Casey. But I remember being in Penn Station on a work trip once with one of my coworkers, and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being the president of the foundation?" I said, "Oh no, I don't. I don't really think that's what I'm here to do." And I said, I'm not really an expert in all the things we do. I'm a great manager. And he said, that's what Casey needs. It needs a great leader. It needs good strategy. It needs to operate effectively. The organization has 200 other employees who can be experts in child welfare or juvenile justice, but we just need a great leader. And I thought, oh, well, I can do that. And from that point on, I think I felt like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm excited about that. I didn't become the president for probably another 4 or 5 years, but I didn't come to be the president. But I had an aha moment that made me realize I did have the skill sets that would make me qualified for it.
Yeah, well, one thing at least I talked to a lot of executives and a lot of coaches, especially. And what's very different, no matter how high a vice president you are, no matter how high an assistant coach, it's different when you're the head person. When you're the president, it's different. And
It
it's just
is.
even if it doesn't seem that different, even if the pay is that much more, it's different when you're the head person. Had you
It
thought
is.
about what kind of president you were going to be when you became president? And was that a difficult
Ooh.
transition for you?
It wasn't a difficult transition. I've been at the organization at that point 8 years. So, I knew what we did. I understood all the work. I knew all of the people. So it felt like a very natural transition. But I got an executive coach 6 months before and 6 months after I became president because I wanted to be thoughtful about how I did it. I was very fortunate that the board knew that they wanted to make me the president about 18 months before it happened. So I went into this role, an executive vice president, and led all of our programmatic work. And it was just this blessing to be able to think about what did I want to do with this role when I became CEO. And it helped me think about really focusing on teenagers and young adults, that was an age group I really wanted to help the foundation do more to help. The executive coach helped me think about how to let go of the doer jobs I had been in and sort of elevate myself to more of a thinker and thought leader for the organization. So I'm grateful, one, that the board gave me that space to think about what CEO was going to be like for me. And then that executive coach helped me operationalize that. And I have to give a shout out to my predecessor, Patrick McCarthy. He was just wonderful as we made the transition. We really have a deep love for one another, and his support and encouragement, he gracefully stepped away as I gracefully stepped up, and it just really made for a smooth transition, I think.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, when we were in college, probably the number of Black presidents and Black female presidents of your prominence, there probably just wasn't, maybe a few, or I don't know how many in the country, but it couldn't have been that many around that time. And
Right.
nowadays, is it lost on you how rare and what a new generation, how these things are happening now? But was it lost on you how what a special thing and how rare that moment was?
It is, when you're living inside your life, you don't necessarily feel like a role model who navigates the world feeling like a role model. In my mind, I was just a hardworking person trying to go through the doors that opened for me. But when this, opportunity happened, I certainly heard from lots of people who told me what it meant to them to work at an organization that had a leader that looked like them, um, or to, partner with other people or meet grantees who found it really meaningful that I was in this role, that they thought I understood in a deeper way, some of the challenges that we were trying to address. So I do this job in the only way I know how, which is as me. And, I've never been anything other than a Black woman in navigating the world, but it is always special to me when I meet people who say they are inspired by my journey or want to learn from me, or appreciate the way that I inhabit this role as my authentic self.
Yeah. Well, you do hear some pushback. Sometimes nowadays you hear pushback against DEI. I'm not even sure where this is
Mhm.
coming from. You just hear it and it just your head spins when you hear about that because people
Mhm.
kind of forget the history that we've
Mhm.
kind of lived. What does it say about UPS and Annie Casey that they had that kind of confidence? Did it make you really proud of the organization that you worked in? That they would,
Yeah,
I mean, you deserved it, obviously, but
mhm.
didn't it make you proud? A lot of times in life, we don't get what we deserve. Did it make you proud that they
That's
felt
true.
enough to give you that opportunity?
It does. Almost from the day I started at UPS, I always just felt a tremendous amount of respect, and that doors open, for talented people. And, if you were hardworking and were, open about what you wanted to do, I always said what I wanted to do. I not the kind of person who sort of sits in the background and waits for something to happen. I always said, hey, I want to go to that foundation. What do I have to do in order to
Yeah.
get there? So I was always pretty ambitious and open about that, and glad I was at an organization that supported that. And even at Annie Casey, I'm grateful that the organizations, appreciated what I brought to the table and was willing to give me the chance to lead in the way that I thought I would lead. I find it disappointing and often frustrating when we're trying to do work on behalf of all kids in this country. And now about half of the kids in this country are kids of color. So it's ever more important that we make sure that everybody has a fair shot in this country. And we're guided by data and the work that we do. And so in everything we are measuring, we disaggregate the data by race. and it's abundantly clear that children and families of and communities of color don't have the same doors open to them. So while there might be people who dismiss, a focus on equity and inclusion as important, the data bears it out in everything we do that is something we've got to continue to focus on. And so we will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned earlier Atlanta, Georgia Peach. One thing about Atlanta, it has a very strong tradition in the Black community, business tradition, always has.
Mhm.
Our UVA classmate Mike Russell, his family,
Yeah.
I knew Mike well at UVA, but so many the Black community, business community in Richmond, in Atlanta is very strong. How did that influence you growing up or impacted you growing up?
Oh, tremendously. My grandparents were entrepreneurs who owned a radio and TV repair shop just a couple of doors
Wow.
down from Pascal's restaurant. And if you know anything about Atlanta history, Pascal's was the place where all the civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, would meet and eat. And so, my family grew up around this rich tradition of civil rights leaders. And my father opened his law firm just a block away from, where my grandparents had their shop. So, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. My father was an entrepreneur. He had his own law firm. I grew up in, one of the most well-known Black neighborhoods in Atlanta called Cascade Heights. Maynard Jackson, who was the first Black mayor of Atlanta, lived just a couple of blocks from me. So to say I was surrounded by Black excellence is sort of an understatement. I was always around business owners and educators and leaders who always made it clear to me and probably all the young people around them that there was so much that was possible and that they were fighting to make sure we had choices in our lives. So I know that I am who I am because I grew up in Atlanta around the people that I grew up with.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, believe it or not, the only time I've ever been to Atlanta for more than a few days was that time me, you, and Burbank went down to Atlanta to see Leslie. We went around. You showed me some of these buildings that you're talking about. I still have not been. I loved it. We had the best time. It
Well,
was
it's
a
time to
beautiful.
come back, Julie. You
I
got
gotta
to
come
take
back.
your family to Atlanta. And Atlanta has changed so much since I grew up there. It was a sort of sleepy town when I was growing up, and Maynard Jackson made the wise decision to expand the Atlanta airport, which really gave the city access to the world. And, because of that, so many companies are now headquartered in Atlanta. It's got a vibrant community and lots of arts and culture. So Atlanta is a place not to be missed, Julie, and it's time to go back.
Yeah. Well, one change in Atlanta that's really interesting is I mentioned the business background, of course, civil rights background, but the entertainment businesses in Atlanta.
It
My son
is.
loves rap music, and every once in a while we start talking. He said, "Yeah, Dad, there are more rappers from Atlanta than anywhere else." I'm like, "Atlanta for rap?
Yeah.
It's not New
Oh,
York. It's
yeah.
not." And then
Well, if you
obviously,
think about it,
yeah.
back in the 80s, LaFace Records was headquartered
Oh,
there. And so
that's right.
so many entertainers, came for that music. And now I hear Atlanta is one of the biggest movie making places. Marvel films all of their movies down there. They've got a big movie studio, television studios down there, Tyler Perry and Trilla Studios. So yeah, Atlanta, that's what I think helps Atlanta continue to thrive decade after decade, is that it's not focused on one industry. It, has all these corporate headquarters that are diverse. It's got all kinds of universities there. It's got the entertainment industry. So it is a city well positioned to thrive for a long time. It's what I hope, lots more cities can be, because when you've got a thriving economy like that, you can create jobs and have a great opportunity for the people who live there.
Yeah, I always thought Atlanta is so different than, for example, DC. DC, many of the African Americans came to DC, were government
Through
workers,
government
military
jobs.
workers. It was different. Whereas Atlanta kind of grew up differently than DC. I mean, we had our
Yeah.
Black businesses, we had our culture, obviously with Duke Ellington and others,
Mhm.
but it was different. It was just different. And then
Well,
Atlanta.
Atlanta had all those historically Black colleges and universities. You had Spelman and Morehouse and Clark and Morris Brown. And so many young people came to go to school and just ended up staying there. My mother's from Atlanta, but my dad's from a smaller town in South Georgia. He came to Atlanta to go to Morehouse. My mom went to Spelman. I'm the quintessential Spellhouse baby, is what they call me. um, but so many people who came there to go to school ended up staying. And so I think that's how you ended up having this, educated group of African American people who started businesses and, were able to succeed in education and business.
You mentioned Spelman and that tradition. How about high school? Did you feel the pressure in high school that you had to produce? What were your high school days like?
Well, I was one of the early young people who was bused to the north part of Atlanta to
Mm,
integrate the schools in Atlanta.
wow.
So I rode a bus for an hour each way from, first grade through 12th grade.
Really?
And the great thing about that was that I ended up enjoying a group of classmates that were very diverse. It was 40% Black, 40% white, and 20% other, other demographics. And I had a wonderful time. I went to public school first through 12th grade and just always had teachers who believed in my potential, who challenged me. And so by the time I went to college, I have to admit, UVA wasn't really that hard. When I got there, I felt like I was really prepared and had a wonderful foundation in the public schools. But it was such a time of transition, with students coming to integrate the schools. A lot of the white students left the school, and people were worried if the public schools were going to be able to stay open. And luckily, we made that transition as a city, and I really remember being a part of that and know that my parents' commitment to me getting a great education and being in a diverse environment has served me well my whole life.
Yeah, obviously has. So when you came to UVA, how did you perceive race relations coming from the deep South, or at least the deeper South? Atlanta is a little bit of an island. It's a little different than the rest of the South. But how did you perceive race relations at UVA? You'd been to a school with plenty of white kids, so that wasn't that much of a transition
No,
for you.
no,
Yeah.
it felt very similar. Although, when you're in a high school, they're smaller and everybody, enjoys the same sports team and you're on the same clubs and activities together. So just being at a smaller high school is different than a big university where, people get involved in all kinds of different activities. But I thought UVA did a good job of creating spaces where we could all connect, like at a football game where you look around and it's thousands of people cheering on a team and they're blue and they're orange. So I didn't feel anything negative at UVA. And even though I went to the Comm School, I was one of, I don't know, 10 students in my Comm School, Black students in my Comm School class. So that felt a bit more isolating. But I knew right outside the doors there were lots of other students, who were like me. So it didn't really stress me out that much. I did what I had to do in the Comm School. Then
Yeah.
I kept going.
Yeah. So when you look back on it, your tax background has served you well. Are you glad you decided to go to the comm school? You were going to law school anyway, I guess, and so you could have taken some tax law concentration there. But did you need to go to comm school? Was that a good choice for you?
I am so glad I went to the Comm School. I think understanding business is the foundation of anything, no matter what you do. Even though I run a nonprofit, it's a business. We
Yeah.
have to manage this endowment. We've got to manage employees. We have 3 buildings to manage. So understanding business is critically important. So I'm really glad that I did that. When I went to the Comm School, I had not yet decided to go to law school. That revelation sort of hit me around the beginning of my 4th year. Um, so I was going to the Comm School with plans to just go, into business when I graduated. But I am so grateful I did that. And even when I went to law school, I didn't know what kind of law I was going to practice. I chose to be a business lawyer because I had that business background. And I really enjoy understanding how business works. I mean, it's sort of the essence of our economy. And though I lead a nonprofit, I understand and appreciate how business makes the world go round. And if you don't really understand that part of the equation, you're not quite sure what you're equipping young people to enter. So I know what the end game is, and I think that makes me clear-eyed as I help us think about our work
Yeah,
and to manage the organization as a business, to
exactly.
be focused on strategy, to be focused on good fiscal management, to focus on how we manage people. I do manage the foundation. It is a big business.
Yeah, make that money go as far as possible, huh?
You do.
Yeah. So, a lot of times you hear, and like we probably both told our own kids this, that when you go to college or even high school, you're going to find your people.
Mhm.
When I went to UVA, my easiest place which to socialize was the gym because I played basketball. And
Mhm.
when you're going to college, you feel like everyone else has the answers. You don't know anybody. Everyone else is cooler than you. And I'd go to the gym, but I'd go to the gym and play basketball, and that's where most my closest friends, a lot of my closest friends, I found in the gym. If I had to ask, say the same thing to you, where did you find your people? How would you answer
Wow. In the parking lot of Tuttle.
that?
And the first day of school, they have these, new student social live mixer things. And I lived in Lyle, which was a new dorm. Tuttle was right in front of that. And there was this big parking lot. And I remember maybe the first or second day they had a mixer. And a woman I'd met when I was in the lead program, she was in lead at the University of Maryland, and we'd, interacted. And a friend of mine said, I think you and her will end up being good friends. And we did. Like, she became my first best friend. And then she brought in another person who was from a neighboring town. And then she brought in two more people. So I ended up within the first week of school having four best friends, and they continue to be my best friends to this day. And we go on
Wow.
an annual girls trip. So I found my people almost at day one, and they have been just my lifeline and my confidants and best advisors the whole time.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm sure. I'm sure I know those people too.
Oh, I
So
know you do.
yeah. So you went to University of Michigan for law school, which was
Mhm.
another
Cold, which was
big.
cold.
Yeah, it was cold. So I mean, it's a beautiful school. I heard great things about Ann Arbor. How was that experience?
It was not UVA, to be honest.
Oh,
College and law school are different. In college, you're very involved in the school community. In law school, it's much more intense, and you're much more focused on, trying to get through this professional school experience. I picked Michigan because it was a highly ranked school, and I wanted to experience a different part of the country. Um, you probably only need a few days in that cold to know that it's really
okay. I got it. We're good.
but I was signed up for 3 years, so I had to stick it out. I met some lovely people at Michigan, but I was not at all connected to the university at
Hmm.
large in the same way I was to UVA. Although I do pull it out when Michigan won the national championship,
Yeah.
then I say go blue. But other
Yeah.
than that, I haven't really been connected to it. But it's not where you have your formative experiences. So I got through the process, and by that point, you're kind of tired of school too. I've been in school for 7 years. I was ready to get out and start working. But it was a great law school. It certainly equipped me for my career, and the handful of people I really created close friendships with, I continue to have those. But I never go back. It's not at all like UVA.
Yeah. What was it like being an African American woman at Michigan? Was there a vibrant community within, like at UVA Law? We're very tight, and I'm
Yep.
still
Yep.
tight with some of those people today. And as a matter of
Yeah.
fact, the law school at UVA, it was like a big high school to us. I was
Mm.
actually probably closer to me and my classmates than I was even an undergrad.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a
Mm.
little. I felt
Mm.
lucky on that. I mean, I guess it's just the luck of the draw. But
Yeah.
what about you in Michigan? What was the experience like from African
It
American?
was much more isolating. Michigan had many fewer Black students.
Mm,
In fact, I think my class was the subject of the law school case
Yes.
in my class. I hope my career demonstrates I deserved to be there. Um, but it was much more isolating. It was almost like the Comm School, but amplified. In the
Mm,
Comm School, you were often the only Black student in a class. And that certainly, it felt like that at Michigan, even though there might have been 100 people in the class, many more than you might have had at the Comm School. So it just felt just more isolating, like you needed to navigate it more by yourself. We certainly had a Black Law Students Association, and I was active in that. And, students did what they could to try to support one another. But sort of the day to day experience being in a class often felt pretty lonely. It felt pretty lonely.
yeah.
Yeah. So it didn't, it was not all unusual when my first law firm I worked at was me and 11 white men. There were no women. There were
Mm.
no women lawyers, no people of color lawyers. And so I think Michigan sort of prepared me for that. I was ready for that
Wow.
experience
So maybe
when
it's
it
part of the
when it
process.
happened. I
Oh, I'm
guess
sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's part of the process. But I know you can liven up. You can liven up any room. So I know you gave it a shot.
I
Uh,
did. And they were very lovely to me. I had no bad experiences at Michigan, and the people at the law firm I worked at treated me wonderfully. But you know what it's like when you are, the only one like you in an environment. It just doesn't always culturally feel the same or comfortable. And so that was sort of what my experience was like at a law firm.
yeah. Well, we talked about your experience at UPS, but I also want to talk about when you went to Annie Casey, Annie Casey, did you have to move to Baltimore? Did you have
I
to move?
did.
So Baltimore and the DC area, we have an interesting relationship.
Mm,
Baltimore is a real city. It is,
it
it's got a blue collar base, which we don't
Mhm,
have. It's got
mhm,
a it's got a industry with the steel industry. It has a shipping industry. It's got neighborhoods, ethnic
mhm,
neighborhoods that DC doesn't have. It
mhm,
is very different than DC.
mhm.
What have you thought about your experience in Baltimore?
It's really different than Atlanta. I loved it. I like where Baltimore is situated. It is so easy to get to lots of places, um, which means special kind of people choose to live in Baltimore. People who are a little more open and authentic. I really like that. DC
Yeah,
can feel sort of superficial sometimes.
absolutely.
Baltimore feels very authentic. Many of the people who live here have been here for a long time. I'd have come here to go to school. I think Baltimore is a beautiful city. I mean, I grew up in landlocked Atlanta. To be in a city with water feels sort of magical to
Yeah,
me. And, you know, like the country's oldest art school is here, Micah. And so there's this beautiful sort of arts and culture element to Baltimore. We've got all these financial services industry companies here. We've got lots of universities, Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland here. So there are lots of smart people here, a lot of creative people here, a lot of innovators here. So I have enjoyed it. Baltimore's home now.
yeah,
I've lived here more than a decade. My daughter graduated from high school here, so it feels like home now.
yeah. Well, how did Eddie Casey get to Baltimore
That's what
you if yeah if the UPS was in Atlanta, how did it end up in
people
Baltimore?
people ask me that all the time. So UPS was founded in Seattle, as was the foundation. UPS then moved to New York, and then it moved and with the foundation, then it moved to Greenwich, Connecticut. And when it left Greenwich, Connecticut, it moved to Atlanta. And the president of the foundation then was thinking about, well, we don't necessarily have to go everywhere the company goes. We could, pick where we want to be. And he wanted to be in, just as you described, a real American city. We focus on low income kids and families. So he wanted a place where that was real,
Mhm.
so that we'd have a laboratory for our work. But I think he also wanted to be close to Washington, D.C., because we do lots of policy work. So Baltimore turned out to be the perfect combination of that, a great American city close to Washington, D.C., but not in Washington, D.C. So we've been here more than 25 years now, but there's no UPS reason or
Yeah.
founder reason that we are here. It's sort of because our first president thought this would be a great place for us to be.
Yeah. What about the long-term effects of the lockdown and remote work? How has that
Mm.
affected um, your foundation? It seems like I would think remote work would be fine for your industry, but sometimes you want that kind of collegial
Yeah.
culture that you get from having everyone in the office all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, our work is really about innovation. This foundation is focused on trying to develop and test out new approaches to help kids and families succeed.
Mhm.
So we aren't in a um, executing on a planned operation. we,
Okay.
we need to benefit from the creativity and sparks of ideas that happen when people come together in different ways. So we have a hybrid workplace. People are in person a couple days a week, but they have the flexibility to be remote a couple of days a week if they prefer. We are trying to deal with some of the toughest issues in this country, particularly issues of poverty. And we can't do that as individuals. We have to do that as a collective. So we think it's important for us to be together at least some of the time in order to make that happen.
Yeah, well, great. Well, Miss, I wanted to end with your work at the Fed, which is
Mhm.
incredibly important work, and it's different than what you do on a daily basis. Even though your
Mhm.
background, I'm sure it's extremely helpful with the tax
Yeah.
background and your
Mhm.
organizational background. But how did that come to be? I didn't know. I know what the Fed is. I didn't realize the Fed was broken down like it is,
It
and
is.
you're on a board that oversees the
Mhm.
president, like a lot of organizations are organized. But explain a little bit about the Fed and how you got
Sure.
involved with it.
Sure. So the Federal Reserve has a board of governors that's led by Chairman Powell, who most people listen to. He's the E.F. Hutton. We all want to know what's going
Yeah.
to happen with interest rates. But the way the Federal Reserve is organized, there are 12 districts across the country. And the idea was that our economy isn't monolithic, that we ought to make decisions that reflect what's going on in regional economies across the country. And so I serve on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, which is headquartered obviously in Richmond, and it manages the Federal Reserve and banks from Maryland down to North Carolina. And so it is how I got on the Fed board. There are 9 people on each Federal Reserve Bank board. 3 of them are banks because the Fed regulates banks. 3 of them are bank leaders, 3 are selected by bank leaders, and then 3 are selected by the Federal Reserve staff themselves. And that's the kind of board member that I am. The Fed board members who are selected by the staff really reflect a range of things. They're corporate leaders, they are community leaders, and they're trying to just get insight on what's going on in communities and with consumers in businesses in their district. So it is not unusual for Federal Reserves to have a nonprofit leader on their board. And if you think about what I do every day, I am trying to make sure that low income people in this country, of which there are many, about half of the people in this country struggle to make ends meet every day. If we don't make economic and monetary policy decisions that help them succeed, we're not going to have a healthy economy. So the bank president wants to hear what's going on with low income families, which is what I know lots about. So we meet every 6 or so weeks and provide him with insight on what's going on. How are families making ends meet? How is inflation impacting their ability to buy groceries or provide childcare for their children? So I view it as one of the most important roles I have, to be able to take all that I know from my work at the Annie Casey Foundation about low income kids and families and how we're preparing talent for the workforce, to help us have the best decisions that we can as a country. So the Federal Reserve is focused on trying to keep inflation low and employment high.
Yeah.
And those are 2 things that matter a whole lot to the families
Yeah.
and kids that we work on behalf of. They want affordable goods and they want to be a part of the workforce. So I love it. I feel like I get smarter as I listen to my peers around the table talk about what they're seeing in their businesses. And I feel like I have something important to contribute based on the data and the conversations that I have in my work.
Yeah. Well, look, Lisa, this has been great. You've had such an amazing career. You've made a real impact, done so many different things, worn so many hats, and of course, and been in charge as well with great responsibility. I was, someone like you, we're young people, so we're years and years away from retirement. But I wonder with someone with you with all the energy and all the abilities that you have, what kind of projects will you take on, you think, when you're retired? I know you're not going to be doing nothing, but what kind of things do you think you'll do when you retire one day?
Well, I've never been an entrepreneur,
Is
and
that right?
so I am thinking about that. My
Yeah.
partner and I bought a house in the Poconos that we're going to turn into a bed and breakfast,
Oh,
and
that's
so,
awesome.
maybe I'll have a future as a hospitality entrepreneur. That
Yeah.
might be something. A different way to put to use those business skills that I learned. I'm
Awesome.
sure I'll be a volunteer of some sort. I
Yeah.
can't not do my part in trying to make this a good world. And I love to travel, so I'm sure I'll find time to travel around. I love my first year. I don't know if you've ever heard of these around the world cruises
Oh,
where that people take a year and they like visit all the continents.
mhm.
Like if I could just have 1 year to travel and do all of that, I think I'd be ready to work hard in my retirement.
Yeah. Oh, how did you decide on the Poconos, of all places?
Well,
How's that decision made? Huh?
it was close to Baltimore,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, and 28 million people visit the Poconos every year. And I thought, well, if you're going to be a
Yeah.
hospitality entrepreneur, you might as well do it in a place that lots of people visit. So it's
Yeah.
got hiking and biking and skiing and just a beautiful place to be. So we'll have to have you up there sometime, Julian.
Well, that'd be great. It's funny. I love the movie Dirty Dancing, and I know I
Uh-huh.
know it wasn't filmed there. They actually filmed in Virginia. But I, I
Uh,
I just love the idea of getting away for a weekend in the
yeah,
mountains and just
yeah,
doing whatever hobbies that you choose. I like to ride
right.
bicycles,
Yeah, I
but
think that's what the pandemic showed a lot of us that
yeah,
we could get back to nature. You couldn't get together in busy places, but nature was a place that a lot of us, found peace and could meditate. And I was one of those people, I really found the outdoors during the pandemic. So I enjoy going and seeing the leaves change and
yeah.
just enjoying the peace and quiet up there.
Yeah, my in-laws have a lake house, a very modest lake house in a lake community in Pennsylvania in the mountains,
Mm,
but they're in the
mm.
Appalachian, the other side.
Oh,
Um,
uh-huh.
and we just love going there during the pandemic because the kids could do remote learning there, and we would just
Right.
spend the days on the lake, and we were by ourselves. And as a matter of fact, the kids sometimes still talk about those days, like, well,
Mhm.
it was a pretty tough time. Well, we were very lucky to have that outlet. So
Right. But yeah, I think nature is so important. We've got to all reconnect with nature. Think it'll teach us greater respect for the earth, but it'll also clear our minds from the busyness of emails and everything that can distract us every day.
yeah, are you going to Black Alumni Weekend this year?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully we can get together, have a coffee, have a beer or something. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I've already got my hotel reservations. I'm ready to go.
Oh yeah, me too. Well, we definitely got it. We definitely got to get together. I'm so glad you did
Me
this,
too.
Lisa. You've had such an
Thank
amazing
you.
career. I'm so honored that you decided to come talk to me for a little bit. And I look
Oh,
forward,
thank you.
yeah, I look forward to seeing you in actually like six,
Couple
seven
of
weeks.
months.
Then. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Uh,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you, Julian. It was wonderful to catch up with you. This is a great format you have.
Oh well, thank you, Lisa. Well, I'm so glad you did it. And now that you're on it, I bet you I've arrived now. I'm going to have all kinds of requests. Say, where's my interview? So I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too, Lisa. It's been great.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.